Hello, everybody. My name's Bill McKibben, and I'm coming to you today from Vermont in the US. And I'm extremely grateful to get to join you for this festival, especially because this year's theme, seeking truth and waging change, seems so important to me. I've spent much of my life working on issues around climate change. I wrote the first book about what we then called the greenhouse effect, and we now call the climate crisis. A first book for a non-scientific audience way back in 1989. So I've been at this a while. And I am so glad that you are taking up in particular this remarkable film today. It comes from, in part, at least an old friend of mine, Raj Patel, who's done some of the most important work on all these issues for many years, but this may be one of his greatest achievements, he and everybody else connected with this work. I'm thinking about it particularly today because of the contrast between Africa and North America that's at the heart of this film. Earlier today, Madagascar and actually Malawi were hit by a major cyclone, Tropical Storm Anna. There are many, many, many people dead and at least 65,000 people homeless. And yet you probably won't even hear about it. It barely has made the news anywhere. The iron law of climate change is the less you did to cause it, the sooner and the harder you get hit. Now, I know that everybody's getting hit. I know that, say, for example, BC has been hit about as hard as anyone can imagine, between the horrible heat dome of last June and the remarkable flooding towards the end of the year and the constant barrage of forest fires and on and on and on. But it's worth remembering that places like British Columbia, in part because they've burned so much fossil fuel over the years in the course of getting rich, have some resources to deal with this, and other parts of the world don't. Recovery becomes all but impossible. These Madagascar hit today by the horrible cyclone was hit last summer by what the UN called the first climate change induced famine in our history. There were interview after interview with people who had been reduced to surviving by eating insects, feeding them to their families for months on end. All of that means that when we look at films like this, we need to think about the context and the wonderful, wonderful, wonderful spirit that comes from Africa to interrogate the West in this movie is a conciliatory and gentle spirit that we should all engage with and be appreciative of the fact that it's not an angrier, more outraged spirit than it is. We need to answer. We need to answer very much the questions that a movie like this puts forward. And to me, those questions are, how can we change? And probably even more importantly, how fast can we change? Because that's what it's going to require. It's going to need us to do new things in new ways at a speed we haven't yet fully assimilated. You all know that in BC, where there's so many of these kind of changes underway and so many fights to try and hold off the change that's coming. I'm thinking about things like the Site C fight or the coastal gas link fight, or of course, the huge battle over the expansion of the TMX pipeline. And all of these are the old way wanting to hang on a while longer when we know that we need to be shifting in new directions and shifting in new directions now. It's going to take all of us. Young people are leading this work, and so are Indigenous people, but that does not give the rest of us a pass. As you can tell from this movie, some of the real resistance to change comes from older people. And that's why we're increasingly trying to organize those over the age of 60 in groups like thirdact.org, which we've recently founded. And I hope that you all will figure out ways to join in all this kind of work, to stand up to the fossil fuel present, to stand up for the renewable energy future, to stand for a planet that doesn't force people into impossible choices and that doesn't make life literally impossible for the poorest people on the planet. That's what this is all about. And that's where you guys can play such a remarkable role. Thank you very, very much for all your good work and for caring about these things.